Good afternoon, grinders. This is your RotoGrinders SimLabs analysis for Wednesday, March 5th. I'm Jordan Cooper, aka BlenderHD, BlenderHD. You're going to follow me on Twitter, so hit that thumbs up button on your way in the door as we take a look at tonight's NBA slate. It's 7 games. We got a bunch of people on the it's like it normally is. Bunch of people on the injury report, Q tags. Obviously, yesterday we did get news that Kyrie Irving is out for the season. So we do have a lot of value on the Mavericks tonight. Although they have a low implied point total, obviously everyone is cheap tonight. Also, same for Utah. Utah is basically sitting half their players. So we got plenty of value on the Utah side. So that's probably going to be, even Washington. Washington 117.25 implied total at home. Some cheap value there. There's plenty of value as of now. There may even be more, right? Because we have Porzingis is doubtful for Boston. We got John Morant is questionable for Memphis. And that OKC Memphis game has over a 250 total. So maybe we're looking into the OKC Memphis game as well. Jokic is questionable. That's going to be a big deal. Jaylen Brown is questionable. Jason Tatum is questionable. You have to figure out what's going on with Boston. But that game's at 7 o'clock. So 7 o'clock Eastern. So we should know that before lock. And remember, you got to tune in to Grinders Live, 5 p.m. Eastern here on the YouTube channel. That immediately follows that is crunch time at around 6:20. And they will go into all the news, and they will give you all the if this guy's in, if that guy's out, they play this guy, and all your questions. You could type in the chat and everything like that. So keep up to date by tuning into our live shows closer to lock. I'm here to deal with SimLabs, and you should be using this tool closer to lock as well, because as our projections get updated, the player projections, the ownership projections, we resimulate the entire slate, 10,000 plus iterations. And as the data changes, if Jokic is out, obviously, Jokic is not going to show up in optimal lineups, and we're going to get more Denver players in there because they're going to project differently. And based on the price points and how players interact with one another, the lineups that have the highest EV may change. But one thing I do like looking at first when on SimLabs is seeing what players individually, even though we're talking about lineups, I always on this show talk about lineups. What players make up the lineups that have the highest optimal rate versus their projected ownership? So we see here is Isaiah Collier, -7, which means he's 7 percentage points over-owned. It doesn't mean you can't play him. It just means that you're much more likely, if you're playing a large field contest today, I have it set for large field, you need to get some amount of leverage. You can't just play, the standard cash lineup. If I put that into lineup HQ on my side monitor, we see that the cash lineup, the optimal median projected lineup, 292.14. It has Collier, Dinwiddie, Sensabaugh, Tshiebwe, if I'm pronouncing his name right, Filipowski, Kaishan George, and then you're double paying up for Jason Tatum and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. But yeah, there's plenty of value on the slate for you to play stars and scrubsy type lineups, but they will be popular. So maybe some of these players that are in like the mid-range are going to go a little bit under-owned. So we see here like Tyler Hero, Anthony Simons, Donovan Mitchell, a little bit under-owned at point guard. Power forward, Kaishan George is it seems like way over-owned. 14 percentage points, which means, let's see, we have its optimal rate at 16-17%, which is pretty good. 16-17 chance to be optimal, and his ownership at 31% owned, projected owned as of now at power forward. Obviously, he's questionable. If he's not playing, it doesn't matter. So maybe, maybe he's a bit over owned. So maybe we exclude him. Maybe we want to see lineups. What do the lineups look like that don't have Kaishan George? Right. Essentially, that's what we're telling SimLabs. SimLabs has already created all the lineups. So you could just, you could take a look at the top, 100, 200, 300, plenty of lineups that project very well from an EV perspective. And you could choose amongst them, or you have your own takes. I want to play a Kaishan George lineup, and I want to play a non-Kaishan George lineup. Maybe you want to play 5 lineups. Maybe you want to play a Dinwiddie lineup multiple Dinwiddie lineups, but not another Dinwiddie lineup, right? One that doesn't have Dinwiddie, because we have Dinwiddie as the highest optimal rate player on the slate at 37%, as projected to be owned around 37%. So, like, he's not over-owned. If he's going to be 37% owned, Art Sim says that he's not over-owned, right? And a lot of times the highest owned player with a $5,100 price tag in a spot where we have him at 33 minutes, is a pretty good deal, even though, it's obviously a tough matchup against Milwaukee. But maybe we do play. We'll plug in Dinwiddie, even though he's chalky. If you know my teaching from theoryofdfs.com, like, it's not about chalk and not chalk. It's not about that. It's about over-owned and under-owned. And as of right now, Spencer Dinwiddie is not over-owned, even though he may be the highest owned player on the slate. But Kaishan George, on the other hand, he's over-owned. We take a look at center. We see, Tishemwe, whatever his name is, 11% over-owned. Filipowski, 8% over-owned. But what do those numbers really mean? Because we only have Tishemwe. I don't know. Correct me in the comments. We haven't projected for like 18 minutes. Essentially Filipowski and Tishemwe are going to be splitting center minutes. Filipowski is 5,500. Tishemwe is 3K. I wouldn't play them both in a lineup. And we have their optimal rates fairly close to each other. Filipowski is like 19 and Tishemwe is 15. And their ownership is about the same also, 27 and 26. I'd probably side more on the Filipowski side, even though there's a little bit more money. But yeah, I wouldn't play them. I probably wouldn't play them both together. So let's decide. Let's decide we're going to play Filipowski, right? Filipowski, and we're not going to play Oscar. Just call him by his first name, Oscar. So we could do something like this and go, okay, what lineups rate well in SimLabs that have this configuration, that have Dinwiddie and Filipowski and don't have George and Tishemwe. And you can use SimLabs for this purpose. So if you didn't want to play Filipowski, you want to play Tishemwe, just reverse them, right? You're just trying to weed out lineups that you actually want to play and see how they're rated. Now, if we push the button, we try to get 20 lineups, and it comes back that these lineups are really poorly rated. You know what SimLabs is telling you? That combination's no good. Don't play it. It's not high EV, right? But we can see here, I can press get lineups. It takes no time. It takes 3 seconds or so. And it shows, 97, 95, plenty of lineups. 95, 94, 93, 93. Like, what do these lineups look like? Like, the first one has Keontae George, Sensabaugh, Filipowski, has Najee Marshall and Spencer Dinwiddie, Santi Aldama, Giannis, who will be maybe a little bit under-owned today. Maybe. It'll be we have him at 11.8% owned, but I think, someone like Tatum is going to be higher owned. And then Carlton Carrington, who also projects pretty well in our projections. So I'd play this lineup. There's nothing wrong with that. You're playing, essentially you're playing 3 Utah players and 2 Dallas players. A lot of your lineups are going to have Utah and Dallas players today, let me tell you, right? And maybe some Washington even, right? Here's one over here. If you wanted to play Klay Thompson, that'll be a little bit more contrarian on the Dallas side. And here's a Tatum, Sensabaugh, Filipowski, Dinwiddie, Marshall, and so basically playing 3 Dallas players, 2 Utah players, and Jalen Williams, 11.6% on Jalen Williams. Here's another one, Max Christie. We have Max Christie actually as a under-owned play today, even though he's going to be 19% owned. I believe 19% owned, and if I just check over here, his optimal rate is 25.98, 26%, which is very high for a 7-game slate. So maybe we prioritize him, Max Christie, in our lineups, and we play him with Spencer Dinwiddie. So maybe we add that over here. We have one of those. Obviously, we have one of those lineups right here. So once I put in Christie over here in our include list, this lineup should come out like basically number 1, right? 95.15. Let's do that. So we basically just select the lineups that have Dinwiddie, Filipowski, and Christie. Here's the 95. Here's the lineup that we had before on the right, but we have another lineup here with Kuzma, right? DeMar DeRozan, right? Kuzma's 4.3% on at 6,300. Not the greatest of values, but yeah, Sensabaugh, Filipowski, Dinwiddie, Christie, and you get SGA in there. with OKC that has the very, very high total today. And here's the Jason Tatum lineup. And you could say, I mean, look how many lineups there are. I mean, there's plenty of highly rated lineup. Here's one with Jokic in it. If you want to play Jokic today, although he has a Q tag, and we see here he still got 3: Collier, Sensabaugh, Filipowski, Dinwiddie, Marshall, Christie, and Jokic with Chris Middleton at 5,500 in your power forward spot. Here's one with Anthony Edwards and Naz Reid. Right, all of these are pretty good. Right, here's one with Jaylen Brown, but he has a Q tag. I mean, there's a lot of people with Q tags, like Tyler Hero with a Q tag. So yeah. So if we go back to this list, let's go back to the dashboard. Like, you could make these choices. You could say you want to play Oscar Tshiebwe or whatever configuration that you want. So let's say we don't necessarily play Dinwiddie. We put in Max Christie there because we have him as underowned. Carrington is also underowned. We have him at 26% projected owned, 31% optimal. Yeah, our optimal rates, like the top guys that are like in this kind of like mid cheap range are Dinwiddie, obviously at 5,100, Sensabaugh, Carrington, and Christie. So what can we play all of them together? Let's see what this looks like. Let's say we put in Christie, Dinwiddie, Carrington, Sensabaugh. I mean, it's going to be kind of stars and scrubs, right? We put all 4 in the highest optimal rate, and don't play George or Tshiebwe. Let's see what this looks like. Let's see. We get look, I mean, 90 rated lineups. I mean, these are great. Right. The number one here is Carrington, Dinwiddie with the Kuzma lineup we were looking at before with DeRozan and SGA. Here's another one with DeRozan. Yeah, this is basically the ones that we were looking at before. Here's one with Hero and Jalen Williams. Here's one with Tatum and Luke Cornett, at 4% owned at center. And you have Williams and Holmgren in here for OKC, which would be great for raw points. Still, rates look. I mean, look how many lineups there are that are like this. Right, here's one with Adebayo in it. Here's one with Evan Mobley in it as the low owned play. Right. Adebayo 1.3% owned at 8,900. Yeah, he's not going to be owned today. Here's one with Duncan Robinson, Desmond Bain, who has a Q tag. Al Horford. I mean, some of these guys, I mean, obviously you have to wait for news on the Q tag type of people. But yeah, this is how you would select lineups in SimLabs. And you would do this closer to lock, remember. Right? Because once the news comes in, once Jason Tatum's out, okay, well, that affects all the Celtics players. Obviously, it affects the Jason Tatum lineups, but if Jaylen Brown's in and Jason Tatum isn't, I mean, that makes Brown a better play, right? So doing this closer to lock, and you see how quick this is, right? You see, you just come in. You don't necessarily have to just run. Okay, I'm just going to run just 100 lineups. I mean, you could do that also. You could run 100 lineups with no settings, no nothing, and just see what shows up and pick any. You can pick any one of them. Any one of them. They're all any lineup that rates in SimLabs higher than like 60. Like, they're all good. They're all fine. The difference between 60 and 90 is not that dramatic. But you see here, you can go through all of these lines, 82, 80, all of them, right? And then you look here, you could even go to the exposures tab and see, like, oh, how many of these lineups out of the 100 have the certain players in it? And maybe you prioritize certain players. This is how you diversify, right? I take a look here. Obviously, Spencer Dinwiddie is going to be in a plenty of lineups. All the players that have high optimal rates, they're going to show up in more lineups, right? It's very easy. Dinwiddie, Sensabaugh, Carrington, Christie, Tatum, Filipowski. And then we start getting down to, Marshall, Aldama, Keyshawn George. But I mean, like guys like in this range with like DeMar DeRozan, Zach Edey, we actually have as if we look back on the dashboard as very underowned today. We have him at a 16% chance of being optimal and him only being 6% owned, especially when a lot of people are going to be playing like the cheap. I mean, Edey is only 4,900, so it's not like he's not a cheap center. But anyone that's playing that range of centers, probably playing Filipowski in that spot, right? Or playing Kai Jones in that spot, or playing even Alexander Sarr in that spot, if not Tshiebwe at 3K. So that may be a good contrarian route to go in a very similar construction. But that's what I do. I just look here and see, what lineup, what players come up more than others, and maybe make my decisions then of who what do I play. But I mean, you could just go, you play any of these 100 lineups. You play any lineup that you see all these green bars and stuff and high ratings. Like, you play any of them. It's about lineups, not about players. And it's about you hitting that thumbs up button on your way out the door. Give me that thummy thumb. You know how much I like the like button. Hit the subscribe button if you're new here. Hit the notification bell to know when we go live. Grinders live later today, right? 5 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 or so, 6:20, 6:30, crunch time. They'll break down all the news, right? Who's in, who's out, who's on the who's late game time decision, late swap considerations, all that type of stuff later today. And if you want to use SimLabs, obviously click on that link in the description and get it as part of the Combo Light package here at RotoGrinders. You get full access to SimLabs, and you get all of our stat pack databases like Plate IQ, Court IQ, Weather Edge, and all of our premium written content on expert surveys, consensus value rankings, all that type of stuff for the 4 major sports. So that's NBA, MLB, PGA, NFL. One very low price. Probably shouldn't be this cheap, but it is. So click on that link in the description to find out more. And I'll see you next time for another SimLabs analysis for the NBA on RotoGrinders.com.